Cool story, bro. More ponies!
I need more ponies.
Written by Shadow Flame. Read by no one, nobody, and others. What Captors Hide. When I came to, what woke me wasn't what I was expecting to hear. But then again, what had I been expecting? Ambulance sirens? A symphony in choir at the foot of my bed singing actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf? No such luck.
What the hell am I?
That scream. It sounded like Fiora. Groaning, my eyes slowly peeled open. My head throbbing like someone had dropped a brick on it, and my body still aching from the transform... Oh yeah, that's what happened. Well, now I knew what Fiora was screaming about. When I opened my eyes, I found myself on my back, looking up at a darkened ceiling above me. Barely any light illuminated the room, the only source being a small window on the wall, up almost against the ceiling. The walls were covered in cracks in its plaster, decorated with chipped and faded paint. The room itself was no bigger than an office, almost empty of all furniture, save for a desk in the corner as well as a radiator attached to a wall. The next thing I became aware of was a moss-green earth pony nearby, fidgeting uncontrollably as she screamed. Her forehooves scraped at the floor in front of her, as if trying to push them off of her, but only in vain. She still wore her clothing that hung loose on her pony body, which only made it clearer this pony was Fiora.
Why do I have hooves?
She shouted, suddenly trying to stand back up on two legs like a human, only to overextend and fall backwards onto her back. She shook herself off quicker than a flash, rolling back onto all fours, before noticing something else, eliciting another scream.
Why do I have a tail?
Screaming again, she tried galloping to the other side of the room in panic, but her scream died in her throat as something tugged against her neck. With a closer look, I realized she was wearing a dog collar, attached to a leash that was tied to a pipe running up along the wall. The sudden force of the restricting leash caused Fiora to gag and collapse back to the ground, coughing as a groan escaped from her. Fiora! I finally felt my hose beneath me and stood up, moving over to her. Are you all right? I stopped as I felt a tug around my throat. Glancing down, I realized I was also wearing a collar, with a leash tied to a different pipe in the corner of the room. When I glanced back, Fiora slowly stood back to her hooves, panting slightly. Her body was trembling, no doubt aching from the pain of the transformation. She must have been out of breath as well, after screaming and running in panic. A quiet voice croaked from another end of the room.
Fiora? Lyle?
Huh?
Fiora gasped as she and I glanced across the small room, only to find a dark brown, almost gray unicorn with a frosty mane. He shakily stood up from the floor, one eye open as he winced from the effort. However, when his eyes fell on us, they widened in shock.
Wait, you're...
He trailed off as he remembered what had just happened before.
That means...
Dale, are you alright?
Fiora asked. Dale blinked distractedly.
Yeah,
He suddenly shook his head.
No, actually, I'm not fine. Where are we? Why are we... What's going on?
He cried out, his voice quivering in worry. His hooves nervously pawed against the cement floor beneath him. Well, glancing between Fiora and Dale, they both looked like they were shell-shocked. I wanted to calm them down, so the least I could do was answer what I could. I glanced around the room again, taking in the other details I'd missed. Well, it looks like we're in some kind of older building. I wouldn't doubt if it's been abandoned or something. My head throbbed slightly, as if reminding me of something. We were probably brought here by that guy from the museum, and it seems that he turned us into ponies. I looked down at my yellow hooves, frowning slightly. And here I was hoping to catch a break from transformation spells. So much for that plan. When I glanced back up, Dale and Fiora were looking at me with incredulous looks. I shrugged with my hooves. What?
How can you be so calm about this?
Fiora shouted.
This shouldn't even be possible.
Dale added.
Transforming like this only happens in fantasy.
Fiora made her way as close to my face as her leash would allow her, which was only a few inches shy of me, so she could shout,
Why aren't you freaking out? Do you realize what's happened to us?
I sighed, my ears ringing from the shouting. It was times like this that I despised having acute hearing. Of course, the only times this usually happened was because either I or somebody else grew said ears. Irony's a cruel mistress. Please stop shouting, both of you, I grumbled. I swear it's bad enough that all of us have super hearing now. I don't intend on going deaf anytime soon. So if you want to hear what I have to say, just sit down and listen. After a short pause, Fiora grumbled under her breath, before backing up closer to Dale and sitting down on her rump. Dale also sat down, though he still looked down at his new form with uncertainty. Thank you. I sighed. Now then, I know you have a lot of questions going through your heads.
Why aren't you freaking out?
Fiora demanded. I shot her a wry look, to which she only retorted,
You said to stop shouting, so just answer the question.
I rolled my eyes. Fine, if you really want to know why I'm not panicking, it's because this has happened to me before. Fiora and Dale both stared at me in silence. For a while, neither of them spoke, until Dale glanced towards Fiora.
I think he's gone insane.
What? I deadpanned. Fiora buried her face in her hooves, groaning.
No doubt about it.
Hey, I'm not crazy, I protested.
Do you think it's permanent?
Dale asked. Fiora frowned at the unicorn.
The question is, was he like this before or after this happened?
Gah, for the love of... I shouted in exasperation. I'm not crazy. For all you two know, you guys could be the ones hallucinating that the three of us have all become cartoon ponies. They both blinked in surprise, each glancing down at themselves, confused. Dale stuttered.
He's got a point.
I sighed. Now, before you go thinking I've gone batshit crazy, would you please let me explain? Fiora shot me a sharp look.
Fine. Tell me why we're tied up here like this.
She waved her hooves in the air for emphasis. I nodded. Okay, so like I was saying, believe it or not, this isn't my first time transforming into a pony. I let out a small chuckle. Far from it.
But how?
Dale asked.
This shouldn't even be possible.
The unicorn's tail swished, as if protesting its owner's statement that it did, in fact, exist. Magic, came my blunt reply. I held up a hoof for silence, as Fiora and Dale opened their mouths to speak. Again, I don't need you calling me crazy. You know my friend I mentioned, the one who wanted me to find something in the museum? The two of them nodded. Well, I explained, scratching the back of my head. Her name's Angela. She's kind of strange. She likes delving into the supernatural, more headfirst than you'd think. For a while, it was just her blabbing on about fake rituals, none of which had any real magic behind it. But then she finally came across something that did work. A spell in the realm of witchcraft, the transformation circle.
What's that?
Dale asked, hesitant, but he seemed to at least understand the bare minimum of what it was by its name alone. It's a glyph or a magic that actually draws on magic, real magic. When Angela found it, she decided to test to see if it was real. But the problem was, this time it was real. I chuckled sheepishly at the memory. I just wish she hadn't used it on me during school. I just about gave Mrs. White a heart attack when she saw me go full pony, but thankfully she fainted, so her memory's a bit hazy.
Wait a sec.
Fiora jabbed a hoof accusingly at me.
You have blue hair.
Mane, actually, I replied, raising an eyebrow. Are you just noticing that now? She shook her head.
No, I mean, earlier this year, I heard some other guy saying some dude had dyed their hair blue in first period, even though some of them saw him walk into class with perfectly brown hair. That was you?
I rubbed the back of my neck, Um, yeah, it's kind of a wonder everyone's forgotten about it at this point. I thought for sure I was dead when I sprouted ears right after that.
But why a pony, though?
Fiora demanded, stomping a foreleg on the floor.
The last thing I want to be is some pretty prissy pony.
It doesn't always have to be a pony. It's just how the circle's drawn, I explained. But that's besides the point.
But
Dale inputted.
are you saying that man in the museum used a transformation circle on us too?
I nodded. Yeah, I saw it being used back in the exhibit. The guy had it on the back of his glove. I frowned. I've never seen it used that way, but apparently it works just as well. Suddenly, a thought occurred to me. Or maybe even better.
What was that?
Fiora asked me. I glanced back at her. Whenever Angela talks about the transformation circle, she tends to geek out about it, and I get to hear a lot of the details. But what I just remembered was, whenever she used the circle, she could only do it once every 24 hours.
So?
Well, that's the thing. Using the circle to transform someone takes a lot of magic power, or chi as Angela calls it. And using it once basically drains a whole person's reserve of chi. It takes basically a full day to recharge it all. So, how is this guy able to pull off 5 in less than a minute? Fiora grumbled.
Well, I don't know. It's magic, isn't it? It's not really supposed to make sense, is it?
Before I could say otherwise, Dale added on.
Well, we saw that man transform us.
His fur seemed to bristle as if shivering.
But what about all the other stuff he did? He closed the gate to the exhibit without touching it. He made a woman's phone explode by pointing at it. And how was he able to vanish, teleport, too? If magic's real, doesn't that mean that was magic too?
I frowned. Come to think of it, that man was doing crazy things, nothing like I've ever seen before. Wouldn't that mean that was magic, wasn't it? I nodded. Probably. But if so, at least I can tell Angela I found what she was looking for.
What do you mean by that?
Fiora asked, jabbing a hoof in my ribs. Wincing, I explained that Angela had been searching for other magic that came from the same source as the transformation circle, and how searching in the museum could have led me to possible answers.
So then, you were looking for more magic?
Fiora summed up. I nodded. Yeah, and I have a hunch that that's what the man was using. But how did he get that magic is the question. Simple. A chilling voice spoke from the corner of the room. Huh? The 3 of us ponies gasped in shock as our gazes turned towards the voice, only to find a shadowy figure standing just beside the door. He wore a hockey mask and a large black overcoat, and over his hands he wore gloves, one of them shimmering slightly from a transformation circle glowing on its back. Fiora was on all fours in an instant, teeth bared almost like a growling dog. But Dale, on the other hoof, meekly shuffled back against the wall, away from the man, staring in fright with wide eyes, his body shaking. I simply stood, glowering at the man. The man merely chuckled. How did I come to possess this magic? This witchcraft? Family secret. I narrowed my eyes. I hadn't heard him walk in, and from the looks of Fiora and Dale, neither had they. He definitely hadn't been in the room beforehand. Had he? All 3 of us had been sure we were alone. How long were you listening? I asked. The whole time. The man replied bluntly. I was curious about a few things, especially concerning you, Little Yellow. But thankfully I learned all the answers I wanted, and then some. His masked gaze turned towards me. I wondered how you were able to move again in such short time, after your painful transformation, but it seems you've already become accustomed to the feeling. I'll admit it took me by surprise to hear someone else knows the transformation ritual. He chuckled darkly. But that can always be remedied. Fiora glowered at the man, trying to lash out at him, but only to be restrained by her leash.
Who are you? What do you want? Let us go!
Ah, yes, introductions. The man glanced towards her, stepping forward just out of her reach in a taunting way. If you need a name to call me by, Then you may call me by my coven name. He raised a gloved hand, and instantly a ball of fire flashed into existence in his grip. I am Teheris, one of the few remaining true warlocks in this world.
Few?
I wondered aloud. Teheris seemed to smirk at me beneath his mask. Only a handful of people have held on to the old magic of my ancestors, but only few can. He smirked in my direction. Your pitiful friend who calls herself a witch may have learned the transformation ritual, but that is all she will ever be able to achieve. She will never learn true magic.
What?
His expression hardened. I heard you were searching for magic for her, and you believe you found it through me. You three will never be able to escape this place before it's too late, so I'll let you in on an old family secret. Not just anyone can wield true magic. While the transformation ritual is something anyone can use, only the descendants of the true witches can use magic drawn from the soul. He towered over me, not even a hint of amusement in his voice. In other words, your friend searches in vain. Unless she has the same blood as I in her, it will be physically impossible to use the magic she seeks. Wordlessly, Teheris turned on his heel, walking towards the door. Before he could leave, however, Fiora shouted,
Where are you going? Let us go! Change us back or I'll kick your ass!
Teheris stopped in the doorway, his back towards us. That's right. Your friend there never told you about the transformation ritual's drawback.
What do you mean?
Dale inquired. A sound like a smirk escaped from Teheris. The transformation ritual is a curse. It can't be reversed, only worn off in time. I nodded.
We'll change back in 24 hours.
Normally, the warlock interrupted, but I'm afraid I've made some adjustments to this particular ritual. I almost found myself too scared to ask.
What did you do?
He glanced back, and I could almost see a smile on his hidden face. How do you think I was able to use the ritual on 5 people, when I only have a chi reserve as large as your friend's? The answer has quite an impact on how long your curse lasts this time around. I only stared at him in confusion. He chuckled at my dim look. I'll leave you to figure that one out. However, he paused for a moment, his amused expression disappearing. Back at the exhibit, you asked why I was doing this.
You said revenge,
I replied, narrowing my eyes.
What did you mean by that?
Teheris said nothing, letting a long silence pass by. Finally, he replied, This world has become the foulest pit of hell, but I intend to change that. I'll stop it at the source. He turned his back on us. In 24 hours, this country will be no more. Anyone who stands in my way, I will kill. Silence rolled through the room between us 3 ponies and the warlock. Back at the museum, we had seen what Teheris was capable of. He could kill anyone with the raise of his hand. Teheris opened the door, calling back as he stepped through it. I suggest you heed my words, before you undoubtedly try to escape. The more people you bring into this, the bigger the bloodbath this will be. The door slammed behind him, leaving us in silence. Fiora breathed, her fur standing on end.
Whoa.
Dale was visibly trembling, tears at the corners of his eyes.
He'll kill?
I found myself speechless. This was unlike anything I'd ever gone through before. But a question passed through my head at the same moment.
How the frick did I get caught up in this?